For too long, we have been asking ourselves two critical questions of artificial intelligence. The first, will artificial intelligence destroy humanity? The second, will artificial intelligence take away jobs being done by humans? Hi everyone, welcome to the Tony Tan Show and podcast. These are two very important questions, and to help us to get insights and to provide answers to these two questions, we'd like to invite our guest today, Colin Priest. He's not just a data scientist, but he's also Vice President of Strategy of DataRobot. DataRobot is one of the premium companies providing AI solutions to enterprises today. Colin Priest has spent the last 25 years of his life as an AI practitioner. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Colin Priest. So, Colin, welcome to the Tony Tan Show and podcast this morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Wow, I heard that you are a data scientist. Some people say that's the next best thing after Einstein. What do you think?
I think that data scientists have better hairstyles. My hair is way shorter than Einstein's.
What is it like, to be a data scientist? How do we become a data scientist?
Not easily, I have to say. It takes so many different skills. You've got to know a lot of maths. You've got to know how to code. And then the tough part, you've actually got to know human stuff, like how the business works, what people really want, how to communicate with people that don't want to hear Greek letters and algebra.
And you're working in an artificial intelligence organization, right? One of the most exciting fields in technology. And how do you feel about that?
I love working in this field. I joined DataRobot almost 5 years ago, which makes me, in this industry, almost like an old timer. It's great to be able to create so much change across so many industries and help people to do things better. Before, I worked in a single industry for a long time, and it gives you a very narrow view on life. It blinkers on. It's just, and it's a very conservative industry. I love being in artificial intelligence, where I'm there to solve business problems. And not only that, sometimes I'm just making society better. So I get to be involved in healthcare. How can we make people healthier, or how can we be more efficient in making them healthier? Because we've got a limited budget. Can we achieve more with that budget?
Wow, sounds like a noble job there, Colin.
I like to think so in my more arrogant moments.
So AI, artificial intelligence, everything about that is just big. You look at the numbers. Research has shown that it's going to add another $13 trillion to economic output by 2030. And there's $50 billion of investment going to artificial intelligence right now. And we also see that leaders from the CEO of Google, Sundar Pichai, and he says that artificial intelligence is more profound than the invention of fire. Why do you think artificial intelligence has such a big impact on society today?
I think just like fire, it's going to transform almost everything we do. Fire brought us cooked food, which actually made us healthier. It brought us protection against animals. It brought us light at nighttime so that we could change the hours that we were active. It's profound changes to our lifestyle. AI is going to be the same. We are continuing our movement away from lives of drudgery, repetition, manual labour. We've been working on this ever since the Industrial Revolution. This is the next step along, which takes us away from mundane mental processes.
Right. And I can understand the power of AI, artificial intelligence. After all, everything we do in our current digital lifestyle is hovered around artificial intelligence. But this topic is very divisive. Right? There are people who think that AI is going to help us to solve new problems, And there's another school of thoughts that thinks that AI might one day turn against us. People like Elon Musk, for example, Stephen Hawking, right? Why is AI so divisive in your opinion?
I think because it's so new. As a culture, we haven't got comfortable with it yet. It hasn't been stable long enough yet. And so there's a lot of confusion. And whenever you've got confusion, you end up with divisiveness. I believe some of what both sides are saying, but I think in the end, the truth is somewhere in the middle. AI is just another machine that we design to do what we want it to. The good will come from when we design it to do good things. The bad will come from when we design it to do bad things. You can think the same of almost any invention throughout society. Fire, is it good or bad? It can be used to burn down someone's house, or it can be used to make the most beautiful cooked stew. I know which I prefer of the two.
Definitely, same here. And I guess Hollywood is not helping. They're just adding so much more confusion. We know of Terminator, we know of Tony Stark, we know of Avengers. There's just so much hype about artificial intelligence. And we understand there's three forms of artificial intelligence. Artificial narrow intelligence, artificial general intelligence, and artificial super intelligence. Colin, we are confused. Where are we? Could you give us an insight about what's the difference between these three?
Sure. Where we're at the moment is artificial narrow intelligence. What we mean by that is that you can train an AI to do one narrow task under certain controlled circumstances. It has no common sense. It has no general knowledge. It has no idea of right and wrong. It has no idea when it's getting things wrong. It just knows what it was taught. It's a bit like we design a sausage machine. It's perfectly okay as long as you're making sausages with it. You try it out on anything else and you're just going to make a mess. But the beauty of this is that many of those narrow tasks are things we were wasting human talent on. To give you an analogy, I'm old enough that to remember when I started high school, we were not allowed to use calculators. Calculators were going to destroy our ability to do mathematics. We had to use log tables. We had to do everything manually. What a boring thing that it ended up making people think that maths was boring. In fact, I thought it was boring. When we've started to finally get away from having to learn times tables, from having to do log tables, and actually solving real problems with maths, that's when I suddenly got excited, because that's the human part of maths, solving problems, making the world better, understanding things, not the drudgery of doing long division. I see the same with the current generation of AI. We are training AIs to do things that humans would be better off automating to free us up for what we're truly great at.
And that's narrow intelligence.
That's called narrow intelligence. Now the next step up, and we are nowhere near it, is artificial general intelligence. And this is going to require multiple breakthroughs in technology. For a start, the amount of hardware in the current technology that would be required to replicate human intelligence would pretty much soak up the world's entire energy budget. Some people worried about global warming now, wait until you try and build something like that. Artificial general intelligence is something approaching what humans can do. Being able to reason, not just do what you were taught. Being able to apply common sense, general knowledge, link two things together, to be able to be creative in ways that you weren't taught to be creative in. That's artificial general intelligence. Now, in reality, we are at the bare minimum decades away from that. We need huge technology breakthroughs, not just in the hardware, but in the design of artificial intelligence to achieve that. So that we haven't even started along that path. Artificial superintelligence is really more like when we build stuff that's smarter than humans. Now, in my more cynical days, I start to think that pretty much anything would be more intelligent than the current generation of humans. But then someone comes along and does something amazing and changes my mind about that. Super intelligence is even further away than general intelligence. And we don't even know what that would look like. But how can we envisage something that is smarter than us? By definition, we're not smart enough to envisage that. And personally, I don't think it's something we need. We just need humans to get more human and do what we're stronger at.
But why are we seeing Microsoft investing in OpenAI? We have seen DeepMinds, and we've seen Google, and every one of these organizations is trying to solve the issue of general intelligence. In fact, some of them even claim that it's just around the corner. All right, and we see that recently OpenAI has created new leaps forward in the area of natural language processing, right? And they make big statements about general intelligence. Why are we hearing these conversations?
Because of the money. That's my guess. We are nowhere near this. But the way we will get there is by companies like this trying new ways of doing things, learning what does work, learning what doesn't work. That's the way humans have learned for millions of years. So what we're seeing are things like DeepMind, and I love DeepMind because it is teaching us that there are new ways to play games that humans have been playing for hundreds of years. DeepMind, in an hour, from scratch, can learn to play chess or Go better than any human. The reason it can do this, though, is not so much about human intelligence and following that. What it's literally doing is brute force. It's a constrained problem. There's only a limited number of things you can do at any point of time. It tries them out. It simulates. It builds millions of simulations to do this and just measures which ones work. It isn't applying any logic to get there. Now, in real life, you can't do that. Say you're trying to design an AI surgeon. An AI surgeon cannot run millions of random experiments to see which ones don't kill the patients.
Right.
They don't have the time, and after they've killed a few, they won't have the patience.
Definitely not.
We can't learn that way. But what we might learn from this is what not to do, or the constraints of the current technology. And then ask the right questions, because the way forward is always to ask the right question. You mentioned Einstein before. He said imagination is more important than knowledge. And what he meant by that was imagining something other than what we currently know and finding the right questions to ask. And the biggest changes in science in the last 100 years is because someone asked the right question. We've got others out there. Elon Musk. I got a bit of a love-hate relationship with what he does. You know what I love? I love SpaceX because he asked the right question. Should we be doing it this way? Can we do this? Can we do that? And the most amazing thing I've ever seen was 2 rockets that he's got landing next to each other simultaneously. Humans can't do that. And that is a great example of narrow AI, by the way. They taught a narrow AI how to land a rocket. And they could do that via simulations because the physics is well known and it is constrained. But we are so far off these other things. The language generation, I was reading about that yesterday. The amount of compute power it took to build that latest version of language generation, it cost more than $10 million just for the compute power.
Wow.
Then there's the energy cost to design that. We are talking a town full of electricity use, effectively, to train up these systems. Now, that's not something that everyone can do. It's not the right way forward, but we need to run experiments to find what is the right way forward.
And you are saying that all the latest, the greatest AI use cases, including DeepMind, that we beat all these top chess grandmasters, we overcome, or we manage to beat human players in games, are all applications within artificial narrow intelligence?
That's right. So, and that doesn't extend to more human activities. I'll give you an example. IBM Watson learned how to win at Jeopardy. Now, that's actually an amazing achievement. That's a complex problem to solve. You've got to understand wordplay. But nevertheless, it's still a constrained problem. You know the range of questions that can be asked. It must come from certain data sources. You can train it to recognize from historical questions what the wordplay is likely to be. It doesn't get it right every time, by the way. It only just had to be slightly more accurate than humans to do this. They got that technology, and they were quite rightly very proud of this. And they decided its next mission should be to solve cancer.
All right.
That went horribly wrong, because cancer is infinitely more complex than Jeopardy. It is thousands of different diseases that you don't have a history to learn from, because every person is different. The DNA affects the way things go. And there are a whole bunch of rules that you have to program in if you're going to get it right, so that it doesn't experiment and make mistakes. Jeopardy, you make a mistake, the worst that can happen is you didn't win a competition.
Right.
Cancer, you make a mistake and you've destroyed someone's life.
Wow. And from this conversation, we know that the data that is feeding into artificial intelligence is extremely important. Right?
It is. The way I like to give as an analogy, your kid goes to school, they are given textbooks. Those textbooks are not full of random pieces of information. They are carefully curated so that it's the right examples with the right guidance at the right timing to optimize your child's learning experience. What we have been seeing over the past few years is data scientists building AIs without applying the lessons from the education of humans, and just shotgun approach. Let's just throw all the data at it we have with no context, without curating things that we don't want it to learn, without curating things that are out of date, and then they wonder why it learns the wrong things. It's like putting a child into the wrong environment. It
Right.
will learn the wrong things. We need as humans to be much more mindful about how we design, train and operate our AIs. We've fallen for the hype and thought that these things are magic.
Well, I like the word mindful that you mentioned, but we'll come back to the word mindful later, Colin. Now, we know that in recent times, one of the most exciting technology that we have been talking for a while now is the arrival of the driverless car. Is that considered narrow intelligence, Colin?
That's multiple narrow intelligences, in fact. It's certainly not general intelligence. One of the problems they're having at the moment is that these systems are having trouble recognizing a parked vehicle beside the road. They have trouble telling it apart from the background. They still have trouble telling apart a picture on the side of a vehicle from an actual reality. It's narrow in that it doesn't have common sense, but it is intelligent. It does learn, and it is damn good at things, at times way better than humans, because humans can't concentrate as well as an AI. So I've been living in Asia for more than 10 years, in Singapore for most of that. I don't have a car. Singapore's got such great transport, there's no point in having a car. But I go back to Australia occasionally for holidays, and I need a car there. Australia is just huge, and the transport is designed around cars.
All right.
But because I haven't been driving, I've become a very bad driver.
All right.
And the last time I was driving along, and I'm feeling all very happy, and all of a sudden the steering wheel is shaking, something's going on with the brake, there's something beeping, and what the hell's going on? And I look ahead, and there was a stopped vehicle in front of me waiting to turn right. And I hadn't seen it because of the sunlight. And I was about to run into it at high speed. That is what I love about AI. It is doing what I am not that good at, that requires that focus, that concentration that a human can't do. The narrowness is the strength. It's quite happy doing that day in, day out, every second, whereas I get distracted.
Yeah, and it's augmenting you, right?
It is augmenting me,
yeah.
and that's the whole purpose of artificial intelligence, not to replace us, but to augment us.
Yes, and it's serving you, and that's what it is all about.
It
It's
is
a
there
tool
to
to
serve
serve
me.
you.
I had someone ask me last year at a conference, will we get to the point where I have to negotiate with my car to get it to take me somewhere? No, never. The car is designed for that. Its whole purpose is to take you where you want to go.
Right. Will we ever see a day that we see these driverless cars on our highway in the next couple of years that's totally without human intervention?
Not in the next couple of years. It's proving more difficult than they thought it was going to be. So that it is still making silly mistakes. And that's partly it needs to learn more. You think about human drivers. The first few years that someone learns to drive a car, they're still fairly dangerous. It takes years for a human to learn this. We shouldn't expect more of a computer, particularly given that humans have had millions of years of evolution that suit us to this. So I don't think we're going to see completely driverless cars on Singapore roads in the next few years. What we might start to see, though, is in more constrained circumstances, like a minibus going around a university campus where it's a fixed route, it's under fixed conditions, it doesn't go at high speed. It's once again a constrained problem, making it more like the problems that DeepMind solves, where there's more constraints. And that's going to be a good thing because they'll learn from that, and that'll get us one step closer to the fully automated cars. Meanwhile, though, I'm looking forward to more and more cars benefiting from this technology to make human driving safer.
Yes.
To augment the human drivers.
Right. In fact, a lot of these autonomous systems that aid us to be better drivers are already here.
Yeah.
We have already benefited from some of this research that's going on. And I would say that most of the modern cars will have so much narrow intelligence in them already currently.
They do, and some of this has been around for a while. I remember the first time I had a car that had anti-lock braking. That's a form of artificial intelligence, and that was back in the 90s. And that made my car safer. I could stop faster because it didn't skid anymore. We've had for a long time where it beeps at you if it looks like it's going to reverse into another vehicle. Now, I've been in a car where someone completely ignored that. It's beeping away, and the next thing we know, we've crashed. So we've still got the problem with the damn human there.
Yes, it's a question of trust.
But we're getting this more and more sophisticated, which I love. You're in the taxis in Singapore now. You hear it beep when they've got their right blinker on to change lane, but there's a car in the blind spot. That I love. Now, by definition, you can't see what's in your blind spot, but the car can.
Yeah, and this is another example of what sort of augmentation that we are talking about, a human-machine interface working together for the common good. Now, let me come back to the two most important questions of the podcast. Will AI take over and destroy humanity? Colin, what do you think about this question?
Not unless someone designs it to, and they were successful at designing it to. AI, like every other technology, is a machine that is built to do what we want it to do. I'm old enough to remember the end of the Cold War, Russia and the USA. And I remember in the 80s, we were really scared. Reagan was posturing. We were really scared that there was going to be a nuclear war. Nuclear power, on the other hand, it has many good things about it. It's actually good for carbon emissions. It's very efficient, and it has its safety drawbacks as well. Even just nuclear power stations, nuclear generators are used for healthcare. So when my mother had cancer, that they would inject her with things to help fight the cancer that could only be produced in a nuclear reactor. Now, every technology we've had has scary bits, things that are clearly good for society, and some things in the middle that we don't know. I don't think that AI is going to destroy society. I think the fact that we're asking the question is why I'm positive. The only way it's going to destroy it is we continue on without asking questions like this, and we just let the technology drive the society instead of the society drive the technology.
Right. And I remember there was once, you talk about nuclear, there was this thing about the doomsday clock, right? Like,
yes.
It moves
Yes.
regarding, depending on the tension.
How many minutes to midnight?
Yes.
I was so scared back then.
Those were serious Armageddon moments, right?
And my parents told me about the Cuban Missile Crisis. I wasn't born then, but they were really scared. We came very close to a nuclear war at that point of time. And yet now it's not that much of a risk, certainly at a widespread level, because we've solved it a different way. We've solved it by having trade. And you don't want to bomb your customers.
Right. I think, Colin, if you look at our history in humanity, the fact is that the best creatures that have created to kill humans are humans.
Yes.
Right. We keep on refining the best weapons, the precision weapons. We are just so good at killing each other. It's not AI that I think is the problem. I think it might be humans that's the problem at the end of the day.
Bad humans make bad AI, basically. Yeah. But what stops it, or any of these technologies destroying society, is that we have an innate need to be part of a society. And we very quickly learn that we cannot be complete and utter sociopaths. It doesn't serve us because it destroys the society that sustains us.
And Colin, I think it's very clear. I think we know that technology is agnostic. It's just how we use it. AI by itself is neither good nor bad. I think that the point has been very clear. Now, the next billion or even trillion-dollar question for you that everybody's dying to ask is AI going to replace human jobs?
I get that question quite a lot. And I understand why people ask this. But let me give some context to this. 150 years ago, even the most developed countries, most people worked on farms. And yet now, those countries have maybe 2 to 4% of their population working on farms. Where did all the people go? Are they all sitting around jobless? No, because the same technology that made it possible for farmers to be more efficient invented new jobs. Can you imagine one of your ancestors 150 years ago saying, my great-great-grandson is going to do podcasts for a living? That job didn't exist. For me, data scientist, they would go, huh? What does that mean? There's so many interesting jobs out now that did not exist. Even truck driver. That job didn't exist 100 years ago. When technology comes about, it doesn't replace humans. It just changes what we do. And it's not a zero-sum game. So a lot of these questions are based around the assumption that the total is fixed. And if they have more, we must have less. But it just doesn't work that way. The reason society is way wealthier than 100 years ago, we all live longer than 100 years ago, is because bringing in the technology made the whole bigger. The pie gets bigger. It's not us versus them.
And it's gain, right? It's a case of human utilizing technology to advance our society, to solve new problems.
And the more we can free up humans from these horrible, mundane, tedious jobs, the more humans can exercise the best of humanity. Now, there's empathy, there's creativity, there's communication, there's ethics. These are things that humans are always going to be better at and that make society better. But while we are doing nothing more than rubber stamping pieces of paper, we are being less than human.
And we are looking at, besides the ability to work well with humans, another very interesting thing that we are also looking right now is the convergence of multiple digital innovation coming together at a very fast rate. We're talking about next 2 to 3 years. The rate of change is unprecedented, right? How do you think AI is playing a role in the future of augmented reality, in the future of advanced robotics, and all this new tech that's coming together?
What I've seen in the past 5 years working in the field is I've gone from the 5 years ago in Singapore, I used to have to explain to people what AI was and what it could do. I don't have those conversations anymore. It's now a question of what can it do next? What should I do first? It's become mainstream. And instead of questions of can it do it, it is, what is the best way of doing this? How do I make sure it best serves me? How do I make sure it's ethical? How do I make sure that my customers are satisfied? When we've moved from the point of can we do it to, yeah, we can do this, let's do it well. And that's because it's getting bigger. We've been around long enough that we're starting to build an intuitive feel for what it is and isn't. So the next 3 years are going to be probably the most exciting part, is when it becomes mainstream.
That's important question. You said it's getting mainstream, and today, because of changes in technology, and also it could be situation caused by the COVID-19 pandemic that's accelerating certain trends. There's a lot of people in our audience who are looking to change jobs or up their skills, and they want to be equipped with digital skills, especially in the area of artificial intelligence. What are some of the tips that you can share with them that they could adopt so that they can transit to these new roles?
Yeah, so there's two different streams of work you can do with artificial intelligence. The most obvious is the technical side, being someone like a data scientist. Now, the best way to do that is do one of the great university courses that exist here. But do more than just that. Get your hands dirty, experiment, go in competitions, volunteer for data science for good organizations that just go and help not-for-profit organizations. Ask as many questions as you can. Be curious and link it back to real life. Don't think that you can get a job that is just about the maths and the programming. Where I get more excited, though, is about people who interact with artificial intelligence. That's where we're going to see a ton of growth in jobs. We need managers that, instead of managing people, manage artificial intelligences that apply the same HR principles, but to an artificial intelligence. Now, you're not going to have to worry about whether that AI is engaged or motivating it to do its job. You've programmed it to, it will. What you do have to worry about is how well suited is it to that job? Is it meeting its KPIs? Has the world changed so it's now out of date and it needs retraining? Does it need more resources? Has the job grown, but it hasn't grown? Those are the sort of things that you want to manage about an artificial intelligence. Or has the nature of the job changed and you need to change what you're instructing it to do? We need people that can take that leap from managing people into managing systems. And we need them to be more people and business focused, not IT focused. Because the real failures out there are failures about ethics, about reputation, or about solving the wrong problem. We also need people that can train the AIs. Now, historically, that's just been the technical people, and that's where things go wrong. Because the technical people worry about the maths. And then they go and solve the wrong problem. And it's not their fault. If no one ever told them the organisation's values, how are they going to put the organisation's values into the training? You need people that understand the customers, that understand the regulations, that understand the business processes, that understand organisational change, and most of all, have critical thinking. They can stop and go, but should it be like that? There's a huge need for people like that in the industry. People that can stop and apply common sense. And most of us have common sense. We need to build up those skills. And you can learn that. There are online courses. There are university courses in these spaces. You can build your EQ as well, because now with the humans being empowered by AI, we're going to need more and more for those humans to connect with other humans.
Right.
We're not going to replace all customer service with AIs. The classic example, because coming from insurance, is the last thing I want is an AI when I'm making a claim going, I am sorry for the death of your loved one. Ugh, that would be horrible. When something's emotional like that, I need to talk to a human.
Yes. So we are hearing the future of jobs just from that conversation that we had with you earlier. And we know that if we focus and we train on our strengths as humans, we will be able to not just survive and thrive in new roles in the future of jobs. Now, Colin, we also understand that organizations today are adopting artificial intelligence. A lot of them are in this path. Of course, the maturity stage are different from organization to organization. What are some of the barriers to this organization from getting this project successful? And what are some of the tips that you can share with our audience to make sure that AI adoption is a lot smoother and a lot more successful for them?
All right. The first one, the biggest problem I see is people trying to do big bang because it sounds so exciting. But that is bound to fail. You're trying too many things at once. You're juggling too many balls. This technology is new. Almost no one in your organization has tried it before. You're best off starting small. Start with some small use cases that you have a very good understanding of, where you know you've got the data, you're very likely to succeed, and you're likely to succeed in less than 3 months. Because if you do that, when things do go wrong, and they will, because it's a learning experience, you'll be able to overcome them because it's a small problem. You'll get results out quickly, and you're going to build excitement. You're building experience at the same time. So don't start big bang, start small, and gradually expand as you learn. The next one along is make sure you're very clear about what you're going to achieve. Don't forget you need to change processes, and don't forget about organizational change. People get all excited about the technology and forget that an organization involves humans. Are you making the experience better or worse for your customers, and better or worse for your staff? Have you given them more manual work because you haven't designed the new workflows well? Are you asking your customers to do more that is annoying? You should be trying to take away those frictions in their experience. And thirdly, be very clear about what your values are. What are your ethical values? What are your goals as an organization? And link up the people that understand that, understand the business, understand the customers with the technical. You can't do this with silos. You need multidisciplinary teams that have synergies. You need the technical people to make sure you've got the technical stuff right. You need the business people to make sure what you're solving is practical and you're solving the right problem. Get them together. If you don't do that, you're either going to end up with a science experiment, or you're going to end up with something that just isn't reliable, isn't technically correct. Get people together.
So we are hearing three things, right? We are hearing take small bites, start somewhere, start small and grow from there. We are also hearing, earlier you said, how to bring and communicate and get the team to function as a group to bring the best together, right? And I also want to ask you, right, to make sure to enable all this success in terms of AI implementation, and also with the convergence of technology. Leadership today is going through profound changes, right? To drive the change, right? To drive the culture change that you are talking about, the end user experience for both your internal employees and for your customers. I think new leadership skills are now required, right? Some people call this digital leadership. Some people call it leadership 2.0. What do you think are some of the new skill sets that leaders have to adopt to thrive in this new digital world?
Empathy becomes even more important. Because we're freeing up humans from the mundane, now they're expected to do things that you can't just order them to do a particular way. That's the last thing you want. That's what you want the AIs to do. Order the AIs to do things the way you want. Free up the humans to use their common sense and critical thinking. So don't order them to do things without question. That's the most dangerous things you can do. You're also going to have to sell a vision. Because you're doing transformation, digital transformation, organizational change is heavily reliant on people being engaged. And they're not going to be engaged if something is just forced upon them and that they don't know why it's good for them. You can't do that without having empathy. You've got to put yourself in their shoes and go, what would make this good for them? What are they likely to be excited about? And then finally, you're going to have to be able to communicate. Too many of these failures happen because the people building it don't know the big picture of what they need to achieve. They don't know the organisation's values. They don't know the organisation's strategies. They don't know the constraints. And so they go and build something, all in well-meaning, that just doesn't align with what the organisation needs to do.
You mentioned about empathy. I mean, there's so much reports, especially today, about empathy. I think it's not just because the rate of change is just so fast and the disruptions are just so fast. And it's also because we have different generations of people that's coming in to work with different perspectives. We've got Generation Z, we've got millennials, and their culture and the way they think is different. And I think when you say empathy, I think it is important for us to then link and bond with these different generation of workers in an organization. And we are seeing also a recent trend about people are following people more than people are following brands. How do you think, how important is personal branding in digital leadership, in your opinion, Colin?
I think it's fairly vital because it drives trust. And when you've got change, when you've got uncertainty, you need trust. And people in the end trust a human. We're actually hardwired to be able to trust a human or not. We decide one research showed 42 nanoseconds it takes us to come to our first decision about trusting a human. And that's because we're hardwired to read body language, to pick tone of voice, and that's how human society has worked. We couldn't survive as humans as a society without that. But if we can't do that, if it's just robotic leadership, it's going to go horribly wrong. People won't trust. They'll resist change. They'll be kiasi. They might even be kiasu. Why should I be the first one to change?
Right.
What we really want is everybody working together. And without empathy, you don't build trust. And without trust, you can't have change. You can't have engagement.
Right. And you mentioned so many times that I pick up throughout the podcast the importance of communications, which is uniquely to humans. And in this virtual age, right, where we have Zooms and because of this COVID-19 pandemic, we are doing a lot more presentation virtually. How important is communication skills to a leader?
When it's virtual, it's even more difficult. The biggest challenge for me with switching to Zoom was that I couldn't see the faces of the people I was presenting to. I could only see my presentation. I used to, when I present in person, I'm watching the room. I want to see what their reactions are. Are they excited or are they not? If they're not excited, I need to either change my message or move on to the next thing. If they are excited, maybe I should get into a bit more detail. Maybe I should give a space for them to ask a question. Those communication skills, which are about actually two-way communication, are vital, and they're made more difficult via the virtual environment that we've got at the moment. But people are changing. The technology's changing a little bit. We're getting better at seeing the presentation and the people's faces at the same time. Thankfully, we've gotten over that whole thing where we put virtual faces on, right, and people look like a potato or an animal. It's more and more vital. Some people are extroverts. They need to feel connected to humans. And they're the ones that are having the toughest time at the moment. You need to work with them. Other people like me are natural introverts. I'm quite happy sitting in my home office all by myself, not being bothered by people. And then I just need the occasional interaction for things like brainstorming, which I get excited about. We need to change the way we work to take advantage of the strengths and the weaknesses of humans.
So you're saying that leaders have to upgrade their communication skills, especially in today's world, right? To get that.
Very much so. You cannot do command and conquer anymore.
Right.
That military style, I am more senior than you just do exactly what I tell you and nothing else, is going to become more and more obsolete as they are the tasks that AIs do.
Right.
You cannot manage a creative thinker or a critical thinker by telling them what to think.
That is profound. That is really profound. I want to circle back to something that you had mentioned earlier, Colin, you talk about mindfulness. How important is mindfulness to leadership in your opinion?
Oh, multiple ways for a start. Mindfulness has been shown as the way to develop your personal EQ. And that personal EQ includes things like communication, like empathy, like values, like self-control. But on top of that, there's the sense of mindfulness in how you run a business. Is it just going with the flow, or are you actually directing where it is going? Are you aware of where it's going even? Now, the whole essence of mindfulness. And I see this going wrong in AI projects all the time. People are not being mindful. They're not making decisions about where the project is going. They're not observing the actual behaviors of the artificial intelligence. They're not thinking about whether those decisions are compatible with their goals. They're not even often thinking about what their goals are. They've stopped and become robotic themselves.
Yeah.
We need to be mindful. We need to think through what we actually want to achieve. Therefore, what decisions are we going to make as we go along to help achieve that? And we've got to observe what is actually going along. Do we need to change course a little bit because the world is different to what we expected it to be?
Right. And mindfulness is that pause in your life, right? Is that focus, that in the presence 100%, so that you do not react, you respond to a situation, so that we are making better decisions as humans. And that's not something that AI could do as well.
Yeah, stop being so busy doing and stop and observe and think. We need that time out to do it well. It's so easy to get caught up in the hype, but mindfulness can help us to notice hype, notice our reactions to it, the emotions. Why am I making this decision? Is it something that's related to what I really need, or have I got caught up in the hype? Why did it just make this decision? It's not, I can't just go, well, the AI said so. Let's observe, what if I did this differently? Is it something that I like or don't like? Why do I like it or not like it? Is it my expectations are wrong, or is it the decision that is wrong? It's so easy to get caught up in the rush of bringing in the new technology and not stop and meditate over what the right way to do this is.
It's so interesting to hear a data scientist talking about mindfulness and words like meditation and be in the present and taking that pause. But essentially, Colin, I think that this fusion of mindfulness with advanced technology is the key to unlock human potential, in my opinion.
It is the true strength of humans. Now, AIs need some more mindfulness too, by the way. One of the things that surprises people is when I describe AIs as arrogant. And they go, but it doesn't have emotions. But I mean in the sense that it thinks it's right all the time. It's not self-aware enough to realize when it's getting things wrong. It's not self-aware enough to realize when the world has changed and it's still doing the same thing. So what we're starting to see as a movement this year is humble AI. And you can train it to do this. You can train it to realize when the world has changed. You can train it to realize that when it's dealing with a human, that human is getting very upset. And maybe you should triage this problem off to another human instead of an AI.
Yeah.
You can train it to realize that it doesn't know everything.
Right.
And once again, let's put it through to a human expert. That's what I'm liking out. That, in a sense, is mindfulness. That's what I think is going to make AI even more human-friendly.
Yeah. You call it humble AI. I call it AI with wisdom.
Yes. Yeah, part of wisdom is being humble enough to know you don't know everything.
Yes. So, Colin, right, you are a data scientist. You are a vice president of one of the most technical, advanced organizations out there today dealing with artificial intelligence. I'm sure your life is not all about, a linear, smooth sailing story. Is there a time where you had a low point in your life, and what was your reaction or your emotional stage at that time, and how did you recover from that moment?
That's a great question, because my favorite answer to that is why I became a data scientist in the first place. Now, as I mentioned before, I used to work in an insurance company, And I headed up the pricing and underwriting and policy wording, so the more technical part of the insurance for one organisation. And I would go to senior meetings, and every time the marketing exec would hijack the meeting and try and make me look bad. The reason we weren't meeting budget was because Colin had set the prices too high. And it's like, I couldn't answer that because being a marketing guy, he was more convincing than me. I was very much still early in my career. I was very much, here's the maths. And no one ever wins an argument about here's the maths. And after a particularly frustrating meeting where the marketing manager made me look particularly stupid, I went back to my office and I slammed the door. I was so upset. I've got to do something about this. And just arguing with him is not the right way. That's playing with him on his grounds where he's got the strength, and it makes me look like a child. And I'd been reading The Art of War, Sun Tzu.
Wow, love that book.
Yeah, there's so much to learn from that. And one of the principles there is never let your enemy choose the battleground. So I stopped. Let's stop being upset. Being mindful. In fact, I'm being upset. Why am I being upset? Well, this guy made me look bad. Well, maybe that's just me being arrogant. Is he making the wrong decision, though? Is he causing the wrong decision to be made? Yes. Why? And I go, okay, it's because we have no clear objective way of saying what is right and wrong. Now, I know it's wrong, but I can't show it. How could I show it? Let's use my strengths. Now, I came from a strong technical background. I looked and I thought and I considered, and I came up with a way of measuring the price elasticity of the customers. How much price movements would affect the sales? And I worked on that. And I used what is now called AI and machine learning to do it. It wasn't called that back then. I was just fumbling my way through. And I came to the next meeting, and when he said this, I said, oh, but that's not what the data shows. Let me show you. And I showed a pretty graph, and here's this, and unless you move the price by more than 10%, the sales don't really change much. And then we went on from there. And that started me developing. I realized that instead of being passive and technical, there's value I can add by being curious, by being creative. In fact, those human things I was talking about before.
Exactly.
Expanding myself beyond the purely technical and the purely introverted. And I've expanded from there. Over the past 10 years, I've become a marketing person. In fact, I was part of the change of what a marketing person is. I developed the skills I've got because of adversity. So it was great. Adversity can lead you to become a better person.
But when you were at a low point, when you were being, to use the word slam, by your colleagues, where do you find that reserve strength to overcome that adversity?
I think it's something to do with also my upbringing. I grew up poor, a poor area in Australia, and my parents did manual labour. My schooling was in a very rough area, and the teachers, because it was a brand new high school, and so they had to grab teachers where they could get them, straight out of teachers' college. And my parents, though, despite being poor and never having finished high school, they had aspirations for me. They wanted me to be better than them, to have more, in particular, have more opportunities than them. And I picked up those values, and I realized the only way I was going to get that is if I went and got it myself. My teachers, to be fair to them, were dealing with difficult classes, so they didn't teach the whole thing. I had to go and teach myself. And I learned that if I was ever going to get anything, I had to go and get it myself. So while that upbringing was difficult, it taught me the important lesson, which is if you just give up, you will get nowhere. If you look and see what could I change, then you've got a chance of becoming more and achieving what you really want.
Now, it's a bit of we are talking about grit, we are talking about perseverance, we are talking about mental strength, we are talking about execution, right? In the view of adversity, I think these 4 strengths that you spoke about allows us to overcome not just obstacles, but allow us to transform to where you are today.
That's right. And that comes back to mindfulness again. Stopping and figuring out what you want from life. Should that change? Why do you want that? What are you prepared to give up to get there? What do you enjoy? What don't you? Where do you get your energy from? If you don't think through those things, you are going to drift through life. And some people can do that and be successful. They're just those annoying, lucky people.
Right.
But most of the rest of us come across adversity.
Yes.
And sometimes it's accepting adversity so you don't drive yourself crazy. And sometimes it's stopping and going, okay, could I think about this a different way? Could I solve it? Could I do a different goal? Or should I just say accept it? And making a conscious decision between those three. And also stopping and going, let's just stop and be creative. Let's just for the moment assume it can be solved, and let's find some different ways to solve it, and then we'll come back and judge whether they're any good. But take away the judgment for a while and just be purely creative.
I like the concept of non-judgment. Sometimes when we judge, we prevent ourselves from seeing possibilities as well.
And we're too quick to jump to that won't work.
Yes.
And then once you've got that mindset, your creativity goes away.
Right.
The best things I've ever come up with is where the initial idea I came up was silly. But figuring out why it was silly then prompted me to think about how we could fix that. And then I started to get better ideas. Rather than just writing it off and going, no, next thing, that just won't work.
So Colin, thanks for sharing this. I mean, there are a lot of things that we can learn from this story. And while we are going through this journey called the University of Life, while we are going through this overcoming all this adversity and growing, is there a quote that is central to you that you use that quote to live your life by?
Yeah, we were talking about adversity and how we get through that. One of my favourite movies ever is Monty Python's The Life of Brian. It's from 40 years ago now.
Yeah.
I'm just doing the calcs in my head. At the end of the movie, there is a song, and there's a phrase from it. Life's a piece of shit when you look at it, but life's a laugh. It's just a joke. It's true, and it's not being a Pollyanna. It's not ignoring the difficulties in life. It's saying, don't take it all too seriously. Find something good that makes you feel good in what's going on. You can control your reaction to what's going on in life. And yeah, there is still shit. You don't have to pretend there's not. But you can find a joke in it. And that's the real thing that I like about humor, is it makes you stop taking things too seriously. Because if you take things too seriously, you're now in a closed mindset.
Yeah, and sometimes you got to laugh at yourself.
If you can't laugh at yourself, now you've got a problem.
Yeah,
Yes.
and it reminds me of Forrest Gump, right? Life is a box of chocolate.
Yeah, and he never took himself too seriously.
Yes. Yeah, I think that allows us to cope. It is a very strong mechanism for coping with the challenges of life sometimes.
Yeah, you look at this year. This year has been challenging. People say, "Oh, I got locked. I had to stay inside, but I like being around people." Well, I'm the opposite. I'm an introvert. But what I disliked was now I was stuck inside with people. But you just be conscious of that. Well, how can I make that work? What is the good side of that? How can I have a bit of a laugh at myself about that?
Yeah, conscious and mindful about that, right?
Yeah.
Which brings me to the last question, Colin. COVID-19 has created so much disruption, and there's a lot of bad news out there. But I personally believe in every situation, no matter how bad it is, there's always something good. There's always a light at the end of the tunnel. What was that something good for you in this COVID-19?
For me, it's making us much more conscious about work-life balance and about what really matters in life. Is it all just about making more money, or is it about looking after our families, looking after our communities? And the thing I really love about Singapore is that, unlike some other countries, someone says, you should wear masks because it'll keep other people safe, and people go, okay. That is just what I love about the culture of Singapore. There's none of this, you're taking away my rights. It's, Okay, let's do the right thing for others. I might get annoyed by it sometimes, but let's have a laugh at that. My annoyance is nothing compared to putting elderly people's health at risk. I had an old school friend contact me yesterday. She's recovering from cancer. I don't want to risk her life. She's a decent person. She's trying to do the right thing. This is what I like, and it's making us stop and think about how we do things. Our organisations have been talking about AI for ages because of all the hype. Now it's really clear to them where it's going to help them and help their customers at the same time. We've got to have a way of social distancing. We can't do 20th century paper-based processes that take too long, that put us at too much risk and just annoy everybody. No customer wants to fill in a form, and no staff member wants to review forms and rubber stamp them.
Yeah, I think that amplifies why AI again is a tool that augments us and help us to grow through crisis as well, like this pandemic. And the other thing that you mentioned is go back to the roots of us being humans, about doing the right things, about looking at the basics of what makes us tick as a human race in this COVID-19. It's a great teacher, wouldn't you say?
It is. Sometimes it takes a crisis for us to stop getting caught up in the everyday.
Right. So Colin, I have learned a few things. I learned there's hope for me because I know AI is not going to destroy me and certainly it's not going to take away my job. Thanks for shining a light on that. I think that is one of the most wonderful things I've heard. And I've heard a lot of wisdom from this conversation as well. Lots of gems there. That's not only for me, but for the audience. Thank you so much for your generous sharing. I think we have benefited immensely from this conversation. And once again, thank you for joining our show, and we look forward to see you soon.
Thanks, Tony, for inviting me and asking me to talk about stuff I'm passionate about.
Thank you, Colin. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for watching another episode of the Tony Tan Show and Podcast. I hope that you find it useful. And to get notification of our future podcasts, please subscribe to our channel. And you find the content useful, give us a thumbs up and give us a like so that we can serve you better. And I look forward to see you in my next show and podcast. My name is Tony Tan, and I'm bringing the